Edinburgh, capital city of Scotland and one of the most visited places in the world. Back in the 1800s, this southeastern Scottish city would appear from a distance to be sitting in a cloud of smoke, giving rise to its nickname Old Reekie. But today, with its extensive green spaces and high focus on renewable energy, it's considered one of the greenest regions in the UK. Birthplace of Sean Connery, Alexander Graham Bell, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and for the Trainspotting fans, Irvine Welsh. Edinburgh is home to one of the largest art festivals in the world, it boasts UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and it has inspired countless authors, including J.K. Rowling and Charles Dickens. It's no surprising, therefore, that the visitors flock here, and I, for one, cannot blame them. I do the same at every opportunity. Rich with history, mystery, and a vibrant cultural scene, there is always something to explore in Edinburgh. And in this episode, you're in for a treat, as I'm about to share some of my favourite ways to spend time here. Whether you're here for the castles, the ghosts, or simply the atmosphere, this city has it all. So grab a cuppa, or maybe a wee dram, and let's explore some of my top ways to spend time in Edinburgh.
Hello friends, and welcome back to the channel, and welcome to Edinburgh, capital city of Scotland. So firstly, let me say thank you to everybody that watches this channel, and thank you to everybody that supports it by watching, commenting, liking, subscribing, sharing. All those little actions that you make help this channel to grow and allow me to carry on with adventures like this to share with you. So today I'm in Edinburgh, and I'm going to share with you some of my favourite things to do when in the city, and some of these tips might be good if you are a first timer. Also along the way, I'll share with you some top travelling tips. So this is an amazing city to explore. That's enough waffle, let's wander.
If you've been on this channel before, you will know there's only one place we can really start, and that of course is with the ghosts. Even if you're not into the few supernatural scares, it can't really be avoided in this Scottish city, because Edinburgh claims to be absolutely full of things that go bump in the night. With its dark past and sometimes spooky ambience, Edinburgh, I'm told by various people, is one of the most haunted cities in the world. And honestly, it does feel that way. It's got a chilling history of witch trials, serial killings, plagues and underground streets. So it's something the average visitor can't really ignore. What I always say though is if you can't ignore something, well, just embrace it, which is what I'd suggest you do if you have a bit of a spooky side and you want to have a really good time in Edinburgh. It offers a range of spooky tours, and in my personal experience, I can recommend both the Ghost Bus and the Underground Paranormal Walking Tour. Both are quite different and both are excellent in their own way. The walking tour I booked online in advance, and it did include a trip underground into the famous Edinburgh Vaults. Now, not all the tours cover that, so if it is something you're interested in, then please double check. But a word of warning, the underground section is particularly creepy and certainly not for the faint-hearted. Once you are underground, you will be told about an array of Edinburgh characters, but keep your eye on the dolls and make sure that none of them move. In comparison to the walking tour, another option is the very theatrical and incredibly fun Ghost Bus. It's part ghost story, part comedy show, but overall a fun, spooky way to explore Edinburgh at night. And if you're visiting with children, then this is perhaps the best one to go for. Plus you get to sit down, which is always a win after a long day of exploring. My top tip, of course, would be to book online in advance, especially if you're travelling there in a peak season. But both of these options arrive around 15 to 20 minutes before the start time. But if you've got your advance tickets, then it should give you information on those. If you have members of your party that are a little bit scared, then perhaps go for the earlier slots when it's not so dark outside maybe. Also in Edinburgh is the National Museum of Scotland, which has got some incredible historical artefacts from over the years. It is also completely free to come in, and it's set over different levels, so I'll show you some of the highlights of this museum. The National Museum of Scotland is located in the Old Town and very close to Greyfriars, which we will cover later. It's open almost every day, and one of the best things is it is completely free to visit. In all honesty, I've visited this museum a few times now and still don't think I've seen it all. It is absolutely huge. The museum covers everything from ancient history to modern science, and quite controversially, it is here where you can find Dolly the sheep, the first cloned mammal ever to be created from an adult cell. What do you think about the Dolly thing? I know, are you on Team Dolly or Team Against Dolly? Let me know in the comments. Some of my favourite exhibitions include the earlier mammals section, where you can peek through a diorama of mammals that were once common in Scotland's landscape. This includes beavers, wolves, reindeer and boars. I actually could spend hours just looking at this exhibit, but there really is so much more to see. I truly believe there's something for everyone at the National Museum of Scotland. There's a full section on fashion through the ages, to a giant gallery that exhibits racing cars, hot air balloons and planes. There's also lots for the history lovers too, and another big section on animals which includes a T-Rex. This museum is also where you'll find those mysterious coffin dolls which I mentioned in the Burke and Hare episode earlier. You can find them on level 4 alongside some other very interesting artefacts around burial and the afterlife, if you're into that sort of thing. My top tip when visiting this museum would be to take the lift to level 7, because here you will find the rooftop garden, and it's a bit of a hidden gem and it offers stunning panoramic views over the city. There are a few benches up here too, so it might be a good place to just stop and pause and just have a few minutes on your trip. If you're into history, royalty, or just fancy nosying around a floating palace, you need to visit the Royal Yacht Britannia. This was the Queen's former royal yacht, and it is now permanently docked in Leith. It's an incredible look at royal life at sea, and I did actually make a full video on this, so if you want an in-depth tour then you're welcome to go and check that out after this. But in short, it's elegant, fascinating, and even has a tea room on board where you can have a proper royal style afternoon tea, just like the Queen might have done. I would recommend buying your tickets in advance for this one. I imagine it can get really busy in peak seasons, as it is one of Scotland's most popular attractions. It's not exactly in the city centre either, but it can really be easily reached by public transport or in an Uber. My top tip though is please don't skip the tea room. It is well worth a visit, and I didn't find it expensive at all. All the food looked really good, but I can only vouch for the cheese scone, which I ate, and that was honestly the best cheese scone I've ever had, so give that a try if it's your thing. And so one of the other attractions that I highly recommend you go and visit is the National Gallery, which is also completely free to enter. If you want to embrace a bit of culture and love art, the Scottish National Gallery is another must. It's also another place on the trail that's completely free to enter. Whoop whoop. Even if you're not a big arty person, I would still recommend popping in, especially if you fancy a good breakfast. The Scottish Cafe and Restaurant, which is located on the ground floor, is where we grabbed some breakfast. It is the perfect place to start your day, I think. You enter through the glass doors at the garden level, and my biggest tip would be to get there early. We arrived at about 10 o'clock in the morning when they'd first opened, and we were able to walk straight in. But by the time we left, which was around 11 a.m, the queue was honestly out the door. It was in this place that I got to experience my first buttery, which if you've never had one either, it is like a Scottish version of a croissant, but saltier and crispier. I had it like Eggs Benedict style. It was absolutely delicious. I'm still having dreams about that. They also do a really good vegan breakfast. They did fresh juice, coffees, etc. The full menu is on their website if you were interested in checking that out. My top tip for the National Gallery would be to come here first thing, grab some breakfast, and then enjoy just a quiet wander through before the crowds hit. Just a 10-minute walk from the National Gallery, the National Portrait Gallery is another free gem if you've still got time in your diary for a bit of art. If you need a pit stop on the way to the National Portrait Gallery from the National Gallery, then I would highly recommend popping into a place called The Dome. It is one of Edinburgh's most beautiful bars, and it was actually recommended to me by a Facebook follower, Tracy, so thank you, Tracy. Inside the gallery, you'll find incredible paintings, sculptures and photographs of famous figures. And if you're doing a trail of the darker side of Edinburgh, then it is inside the library here where you will find a selection of death masks, including those of the infamous serial killers Burke and Hare. There was also a rather disturbing exhibit about a black pudding made from human blood, but I'm not even going to go into that because I do not want to put you off your breakfast or lunch or whatever. But if you are interested in history, then you might like to know this place has the most extensive and significant collection of Jacobite visual material in the world. There were some incredible paintings of Bonnie Prince Charlie through the ages, and honestly they looked as though they'd only been created yesterday. They were fantastic. Besides all this, one of the biggest draws is the building itself, which is a red sandstone Gothic revival. I'm told it was built around 1885 to 1890, and I thought that was absolutely stunning in itself. Because it's an old building, the gallery is over multiple floors, but there is a lift available, so if you need an accessible route, there aren't any problems here. Hidden beneath the Royal Mile, the real Mary King's Close is one of Edinburgh's most fascinating and eerie attractions. This underground network of streets and homes was once a bustling part of the city, but due to plague outbreaks and urban development, it was sealed off and forgotten. Until 2003. Today you can take a guided tour through the dimly lit alleyways where costumed guides share spine-chilling tales of past residents, ghostly apparitions, and the grim realities of 17th century life here. One of the most famous stories is that of Annie, a little girl who allegedly haunts one of the rooms. Visitors can often leave dolls and toys for her, just in case. My top tips, though, for visiting the real Mary King's Close would be to book your tickets in advance. Tours really do sell out quickly here, especially during the peak seasons. Also, if you're a bit claustrophobic, be aware that some spaces are quite narrow. And unfortunately, you're just not allowed to film or take photographs here, so I don't have any footage to share with you. But it doesn't mean it is not worth venturing into. You will have to take my word and TripAdvisor's word for that. A really lovely thing to do if you are in Edinburgh is come to the Princess Street Gardens, which does have a dark and grisly history. I'll tell you a little bit about that, but now it's just a beautiful recreational area where you can come and walk through for free, and it's nice any season. Obviously I'm here in January, but it's still a beautiful place to walk. I imagine in summer, if you bring a picnic, it will just be fantastic. If you need a break from all the history and the ghosts, then Princess Street Gardens is the perfect place to relax. This beautiful public park sits right in the heart of the city, and it offers some stunning views of Edinburgh Castle. Whether you fancy a picnic, a stroll, or just some time to sit and people watch, this spot is a must. Now here is a fun fact for you guys. What you see today as Princess Street Gardens actually wasn't always a gardens. It was once a lock known as Nor Lock, which served part of Edinburgh's defences. Now, unfortunately, it has got a bit of a dark side to it. It was known as a dumping ground for waste and allegedly the site of multiple witch dunkings. So maybe don't think about that while you're enjoying your sandwiches. But you can learn more about the witchy side of Edinburgh in one of the walking tours. And if you're interested, you can see some of the paintings of Norloch, when it was a lake in the garden, if you do visit the National Gallery. So that's one to take in if you're interested.
And one of the best things that I think about Princes Street Gardens is, of course, the bear statue, which is well worth a visit. And I'll tell you a little bit of story about the bear and why he's here in Edinburgh.
This statue in Princes Street Gardens commemorates one of the most remarkable and beloved stories from World War II. Wojtek was a Syrian brown bear adopted by Polish soldiers of the 22nd Artillery Supply Company during the war. The soldiers found him as an orphaned cub in Iran in 1942 and raised him as part of their unit. Wojtek became much more than a mascot. He was actually treated like one of the troops, even learning to salute, wrestle with soldiers and drink beer, which apparently he loved. Most famously, during the Battle of Monte Cassino in 1944, Wojtek helped carry artillery shells to the front lines. To officially allow him to travel with the Polish troops, he was even enlisted into the army as Private Wojtek, complete with a service number and rank. I mean, it's an incredible story. After the war, Wojtek was stationed at Winfield Airfield in Scotland, where he became popular with the locals and press. His comrades believed that he might not survive in the wild, and they really didn't want him to be used for propaganda by the communist authorities in Poland. So when the Polish soldiers were demobilised, he was given to Edinburgh Zoo. Now, Wojtek died in the Edinburgh Zoo in 1963 at the age of 21, and he is now commemorated by this statue in the gardens. So have you seen him? Have you heard the story before? I think it's absolutely incredible. If you're visiting the city for a bit of a boozy time, then you may be pleased to hear that Edinburgh is absolutely brimming with cosy pubs and quirky bars. There is certainly something here for every scene. There's some really cool theme bars. The Cocktail Geeks, that's really cool. They change their theme every 4 months. And there's also, of course, some really old historical pubs, including many that claim to be haunted. And if you're interested in that, then I did do a tour of Edinburgh's most haunted pubs in a previous video, so I won't go into any more detail on that here, but I will drop a link somewhere. One thing worth noting, obviously it's popular for hen do's, it's popular for stag do's, it's popular for couples coming for a drink, but if you are coming with the kids, one thing we did notice which is very different to England, many of the bars won't let children in that are under 18. It's something to do with the legal laws in Scotland, so you can't just pop in for a pit stop and get a Coke and a bag of crisps. If you've got the kids in tow, you'll need to look for a cafe, or there's plenty of fast food joints, that sort of thing. I'm just mentioning it because it was our very first time we visited, and we were quite surprised that that was a thing here in Scotland, but it is, so that's the way it goes. Now, I know visiting cemeteries is not going to be everyone's cup of tea when visiting a new city, but hear me out on this one, because Edinburgh's cemeteries are as atmospheric as they are historic. Greyfriars Kirkyard is one of the most famous, and it's home to the legendary Greyfriars Bobby. If you don't know the story, Bobby was a loyal dog who guarded his owner's grave for years. It's a really lovely story. It's also home to the infamous Mackenzie poltergeist, which I'll not go into detail and spoil you on here, just in case you're going to do the ghost walk. But if you do want to know the full story, I did share that on my Facebook page a few weeks ago. But it is quite scary, so I will warn you. Carlton Hill Cemetery is another fascinating spot, and that's got stunning views and impressive tombs, including that of the philosopher David Hume. And if you're into the Gothic architecture and eerie tales, honestly, none of these cemeteries are going to disappoint you. Some of the cemeteries in Edinburgh are said to have been the inspiration for many creative works, and it is where the names of some of our favourite literary characters have drawn inspiration. So if you're in the Canongate, then be sure to look out for the grave of Ebenezer Scrooge, which Dickens passed by in the 1840s. If you're still in Greyfriars, you can notice a few Harry Potter connections, because it was whilst walking through this cemetery that J.K. Rowling took inspiration for some of those book characters. Look out for Robert Potter, Sirius Black and Tom Riddle, all of which can be found here at Greyfriars. And on that note, if you're potty about Potter, then there are several other places to visit in Edinburgh with a connection to the stories, including Victoria Street, which is said to have given the inspiration for Diagon Alley, and the castle itself, which is thought to have inspired Hogwarts Castle. Honestly, I could talk about Edinburgh forever, and in the future I may return and make some more videos for you. But very briefly, here are a few extra gems to check out. Firstly, it would be a sin, of course, not to mention Edinburgh Castle. It is located at the end of the Royal Mile and built on a 700 million year old extinct volcano. It's one of the city's biggest attractions, and it is worth doing if you're a history fan. I just didn't get enough footage of it to share it with you today, but my top tip would be to do the audio tour, which I believe is included in your ticket price. And then of course there is the Royal Mile, which is one of the most famous streets in Edinburgh. It connects the castle to the palace of Holyrood House. And a fun fact here is that the Royal Mile isn't actually a mile long. It's said to measure 1 mile and 107 yards. So that's one to save for your next quiz. There are a few tourist traps down here on the Royal Mile, but it is also full of interesting places too. Be sure to check out some of the closes that branch off this street. They are very narrow alleyways that were originally access paths to homes and businesses. My favourites to look out for include Craig's Close, which is the narrowest of the original lanes at only 2 feet wide approximately. And of course World's End Close, a reminder of the days when this point marked the edge of Edinburgh's boundary, where the World's End was quite literal for its inhabitants, because far beyond this boundary lay complete uncertainty. And lastly, one of my favourites, because it also has an excellent bar coming off it, is Advocates Close. Now it's named after Sir James Stewart, a former Lord Advocate of Scotland in the early 18th century. But from this close, you can expect striking views of the Scott Monument and Princes Street. And if you are in need of some refreshment at this point, then look out for the Devil's Advocate. It's located in a former boiler house on this close, and it not only has an impressive historical interior design, but it holds over 300 Scottish and world whiskies, if that's your thing. And there you have it, just a few more reasons why Edinburgh is one of my favourite places in the world. Thank you to everybody for watching this video. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments, and if I can't answer, then perhaps somebody else can. Also, if you have a favourite spot in the city that I haven't mentioned, feel free to share it. Thank you once again. Have an amazing time if you come into Edinburgh, and hopefully I will see you in the next episode.